Story 1. I can forget your name 5 seconds after you tell me, but I will never forget your face. Story 2. I can make any situation uncomfortable in a matter of seconds. Story 3. I can sense cardinal directions. You can put me in a dark room, spin me around 5 times, and I can still tell you which way is north within a couple of degrees. Combined with my ability to drive somewhere once and remember the route, the global positioning system is largely irrelevant to me. Story 4. I can control something in my ears, so I can have my ears plugged and unplugged on demand. I can have my right ear plugged, my left, both or neither. This lets me hear my inner sounds better, such as humming or my heartbeat. I discovered this when I was very young, and it has always been with me. I have always loved singing and music, so it was fun and helpful to copy the music I heard by singing. Story 5. Honestly, I can tell when someone is on the autism spectrum after spending about 10 seconds with them. Yes, some people are very obvious, but I have noticed individuals whose parents or teachers did not realize anything was atypical. Story 6. I can hear songs within songs too easily. I don't know how accurate that is, but it ruins them sometimes. The most recent were Coconut Girl by Brother Noland and Red Right Hand by Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. Story 7. Ask me how many letters are in a word, how many words are in a sentence, and so on. I can tell you immediately. I can even determine the numerical value of any letter and habitually add those values whenever I see a word out of boredom. Story 8. My migraines worsen when the weather is about to change. I am effectively a living barometer. Story 9. I can taste food and know what is missing and how much to add. Story 10. I can make the price of any investment crash just by buying it. Story 11. I can look you right in the face during an entire conversation and not hear a single word you say. Story 12. I can intentionally miss the toilet and urinate on the floor. Story 13. It's hard to explain. I pick up on patterns very easily, almost in a detective-like way. I'm not talking about images. I mean patterns in people's behavior. If someone says or does something more than once, I connect the dots. I have a very good record. For example, our chef used to have meltdowns. I told the venue owner, who is a good friend, when the next meltdown would occur. Sure enough, the chef had a meltdown and quit on the day I predicted. Story 14. Boundless empathy. Putting myself in other people's shoes. Being neurodiverse, I recognize and sympathize with others like me. Story 15. I have a better sense of smell than most people. As a child, I could identify people approaching me by their scent. Story 16. I have excellent night vision, but my right eye is on another level and comes with drawbacks. Its reading vision is getting noticeably worse with age, and I have to keep it closed in bright areas, or it feels like the sun is shining in my peripheral vision. Even when light hits only the left side of my face, my right eye tends to stay closed. Story 17. I can sometimes sense events before they happen, both large events unrelated to me and small events that involve me. I can also do other things. Story 18. I do not care what other people think. I live my life the way I want. Story 19. I react well under pressure. I usually do not stand out, except when I must lead or respond in more difficult situations. Story 20. I can smell disease on people's breath. I do not have a heightened sense of smell, so I have to be very close. It does not affect me much in day-to-day life. If my wife or children feel down, I can tell them what is coming. I can identify colds and stomach bugs easily, and I can tell when my wife is on her period. The worst is when I have an illness and I cannot stop smelling it. Interestingly, when I had coronavirus disease 2019, I lost this ability for about a year. I thought I had returned to normal, but then it reappeared. Hospitals are strange because everyone there is sick and the different smells are overwhelming. I cannot identify anything in a hospital. My father passed away a couple of years ago, and when I went to see him, he had only been gone 10 minutes. The smell was the worst thing I have ever experienced. I do not know if it was a disease he had or some sort of after-death issue. I think it was bacterial, not spiritual, but it was awful and nobody else even noticed it. Anyway, there it is. Story 21. I can learn things I find interesting extremely fast. For example, I learned web development and built a full-stack website with authentication, anonymous messaging, inventories, items, a structured query language database, support for advertisements, and leveling. All of this in 10 days with no prior web development experience, no tutorial, just a 2-hour overview of how the technology works and Google. I also taught myself how to play the guitar, three-dimensional art, animations, game development in Unity and Unreal Engine, app development, and many other things. But I cannot learn things I find boring. You could force me to study in uncomfortable conditions, and I still would not be able to learn something if I do not find it interesting. It is a blessing and a curse. Story 22. I'm invisible because people don't see me. I guess it might be because I'm ugly too. Story 23. Whatever you talk about, you form a clear picture in your mind. Even if the subject is unfamiliar, you infer and generate a series of images based on information from the conversation. Story 24. Mine is invisibility. I have been invisible my entire life. I hear and see many things that visible people are not privy to. Story 25. My superpower is the ability to simultaneously annoy and bore people to death. Story 26. I have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and can do 8 hours of work in 1 hour after being stressed in buffer mode for 4 days. Story 27. I am immune to farts. I cannot smell them anymore after having coronavirus disease 2019. Story 28. I can forget what you said at the beginning of a sentence by the end. Story 29. I have a lot of energy. I have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and smoke a lot of cannabis to compensate for my extreme hyperactivity. But even then I have more energy than anyone I know. I play 3 sports a day. Otherwise I have trouble falling asleep at night. Story 30. It is not exactly a useful superpower, but I have accurately predicted several negative events. I was rejected at the final stage of a job process when everyone expected I was a shoo-in. I predicted the end of a friendship. I predicted being fired from a job. I am now predicting that I will soon lose another friendship that blossomed over the past year. Story 31. I can smoke a pack of cigarettes and run 20 miles at the same time. Story 32. Given a sound, I can determine which musical note name it is. For example, the electrical transformer outside my home usually sounds like a B flat. This ability is called absolute pitch. Story 33. I have an uncanny ability to say "hey man" to someone who remembers my name but whose name I do not remember, and to do so naturally, so they do not become suspicious. Story 34. I can make ugly guys suddenly appear much more attractive just by being in the same room with them. Story 35. I can recognize songs by listening for less than a second, just milliseconds. I once organized a quiz that included a song recognition round. Because I assumed everyone had the same skill, I prepared very short fragments of famous songs by artists such as Agnetha, Bjorn, Benny, and Anni-Frid, and the Beatles. No one could guess the songs. The round ended in surprise and frustration, so I had to stop it. Story 36. I have superior semicircular canal dehiscence, which allows me to hear many internal sounds that others cannot, such as my heartbeat, footsteps, the sound of my eye movements, and sounds when I rotate my neck. I notice these only when the room is quiet. Story 37. I can bend my left thumb backward more than my right. I like pretending to perform the healing animation from Far Cry with it. Story 38. I have a super sense of smell. I can detect faint odors that nobody else can, including the moment food begins to spoil and pheromones, such as when women are menstruating. I throw away a lot of food that most people consider fine to eat, which drives my family crazy. It is more of a curse. Story 39. Telepathy. And yes, I heard you say bullshit just now. Not very nice of you. Story 40. If I think really hard about someone, they will usually call or text me. Story 41. I can see in 3 dimensions in my mind. I can disassemble, examine, and reassemble objects before ever laying my hands on them. It makes building and repairing things much easier. Story 42. Every time I speak well of someone or trust them, they prove me wrong within 24 hours. Story 43. I am sterile and cannot become pregnant. I would definitely say that is a superpower, laughing out loud. Story 44. I can eat my wife out as long as she wants without my tongue getting tired. Story 45. I can make anyone feel awkward and uncomfortable because of my social anxiety. Story 46. I have a great sense of hearing. Similar to a cat, I can tell where people are and who they are by the sound of their steps. My head essentially tracks everyone's location nearby. I use this ability in public as well. I can sense things around me even when I cannot see them. Story 47. I can close my eyes and create an environment so real that I feel like I am there. Smells, sensations, and colors. With my eyes open and a bit of concentration, I can create a three-dimensional object in front of me that appears to be there. Who needs Pornhub when you can conjure Padme in an Ewok outfit in your living room? Story 48. I can stay calm in the worst situations, even under high pressure. Story 49. I can make an irate, difficult customer like me. You said curse, right? Story 50. I never forget a route I drove or walked, but I forget other things so easily. Story 51. I remember every meeting I have had, going back many years. I remind people what they said if they try to avoid doing what they promised. Story 52. Being able to tell whether someone is lying or telling the truth. Story 53. I am stupidly good at crossing my eyes. I can make them move almost fully independently in any direction. Story 54. I can tell you do not like or approve of me just by looking at me. Story 55. Sometimes I see situations in my mind before they actually happen. They are mostly small things, but also larger ones. I also remember my past life. Story 56. When someone loses something or forgets where they placed it, I can feel where it is. Story 57. I get a funny feeling and can predict when rain will arrive within a few hours. I am usually right. It is probably an evolutionary trait I take for granted, but I understand that not everyone can do this. Story 58. People tell me their life stories and their psychological problems. Story 59. Whenever I find a place that serves good food and bring a friend, the place decides we do not deserve it. So yeah, a superpower I did not ask for. Story 60. I can pump emotional energy into my body at will to some extent. This is energy control. I believe everyone can do it, but most do not know how. It is similar to learning to suppress your energy as a child when adults say calm down or act tense, but in the opposite direction. I focus on the energy I want to hold or share and let it flow into me and fill me up, laughing out loud. Story 61. Sometimes this happens and I do not know how. I wake up scratching my head about what I did the night before after blacking out from drinking, and I worry for the next 4 days that I embarrass myself. Story 62. I can wake up 5 minutes before my alarm, no matter what time I set it. I really lucked out. Story 63. I do not know, but people around me are starting to think they have superpowers, so I think that may be it. Story 64. I can burp on demand. I don't know if that is common, but anytime I feel like I've had too many sodas, I can burp all the gases away. Story 65. I make cooking videos, but I am too anxious to put them online. Story 66. On long airplane flights of 10 hours or more, I can stare at the back of the seat in front of me quite happily for the entire journey, watching no movies and listening to no music. Story 67. The left side of my face was torn off when I was 9 and reconstructed over the course of 15 years. I cannot feel any pain on the reconstructed side. It got me through a lot of schoolyard fights. Story 68. I can always hit a crosswalk when no cars are coming and never break stride. It also works most of the time with streetlights. Story 69. Odd things happen to me or around me quite often. I can tell stories about them for days. I also always pick the slowest line at the grocery store. Story 70. I would take the Za Warudo time stop any day. Its uses are insane. Need quick movement or a way to leave a situation. Done. Study the time stop and review your notes. Time stop is also a massive troll, as Dio showed. Story 71. I can forget your name while I am still shaking your hand. Does that count? Story 72. My mom says I always pick the best thing at any restaurant, so she just orders whatever I get. Story 73. I can mostly resist the urge to respond to aggravating or ignorant comments. Story 74. I get ideas for new craft projects several times a week and have more than 25 unfinished ones in about 8 different media. Story 75. I get good parking spots. It happens so often I call it my superpower. One time 8 of us went to dinner after work and all drove to the restaurant. I was the last to leave the office and told them I would be okay because of my superpower. They waited at the entrance. When I pulled into the lot, someone left a space right next to the door, giving me the prime spot. Story 76. I know someone's sibling dynamics and whether they are an only child. Story 77. Apparently most people do not have complex dreams every night. I can escape to other realities in my mind. Story 78. I somehow always know when someone is coming around the corner, and I stop. Story 79. I wake up instantly at the smallest noise. Burglars do not stand a chance against me. Story 80. If you ask me what time I will arrive, I am almost always there at exactly that time. Story 81. I can find a way to feel like the victim in any situation. Story 82. During my clinicals to become an emergency medical technician, I needed to get 5 advanced life support calls. The minimum requirement was to see 5 patients who were either attached to a cardiac monitor with adhesive electrode leads on the chest or who had an intravenous line placed. I had 4 days to do this. Anyone who works in the field knows this should have been simple. You can easily get 5 advanced life support calls in a day, depending on city size. Instead, we barely got any calls. Over each 12-hour shift, we ran between 1 and 3 calls, most of them basic life support. I joked to myself that I must emanate an aura of peace. Then I got the job and had 1 month of probation, during which my field training officer would gauge my skills. Once again, we saw almost nothing. I even worked during a hurricane and barely saw any calls. Now I work a truck regularly. Every day I hope for a good shift, and most days are peaceful or easy. Even on the rough days, they remain manageable. We had a motor vehicle collision recently. A car plowed into a motorcycle. The rider lay on the pavement and the fire department already had an automated mechanical chest compression device performing compressions. Aside from needing cardiopulmonary resuscitation, the patient was in remarkably good condition for having been thrown from his bike. No broken limbs, no abrasions, nothing. That made for a relatively easy call. In conclusion, I think I am blessed with the ability to generate an aura of peace. I believe bad days get better when I am there, although I try to be humble because it sounds arrogant to say. I like to combine that with being cheerful and making people happy, because it is fun to be the person everyone wants to see and to feel like a good luck charm. Story 83. I once stayed awake for 36 hours because I was rushing a school assignment. At the 36th hour, I began hallucinating and the floor seemed to warp. Story 84. I have a pretty solid internal compass. I can judge my direction with about 95% accuracy. My only weakness is exiting a store or stall in a mall or night market. I should not have told you that. Story 85. People throw things at me, but I don't care if they stick, because I know what I did and what I did not do. I do not smell worse than usual, and if I do, I will take a shower before I have some tea. Cheers. Have a good day. Story 86. Surprisingly, I have never been very sick. The worst I have had was coronavirus disease 2019, which lasted about 3 days. I felt like I had a bad cold. Story 87. I can fall asleep within 5 minutes, sleep for any length of time, and wake up feeling refreshed. Story 88. My antidepressants have made me the man who does not finish. Story 89. I provide expert relationship advice and have helped hundreds of people turn their lives around. Story 90. I can look at a map for 1 minute and walk there without referring to it. Story 91. I can predict everyone's future with 100% accuracy, including my own. Story 92. Endurance and the ability to run to my bathroom and urinate before a Call of Duty game. Story 93. Finding one of every type of sock I own before finding a matching pair. Story 94. Truth. I have an ironic superpower. My brain is a sponge and absorbs information, but the ironic part is I do not decide when that information becomes available to me. Imagine a normal person's brain is a filing cabinet. Some people have a single drawer, some have 2, 3, or maybe 10. There may be a folder or two of random junk memories, but for the most part it is pretty organized. A folder for cooking knowledge, a math folder, a science folder, and so on. Mine is a warehouse with no shelving, just massive piles of all kinds of knowledge. But I cannot recall it on demand. I will be watching television and just know what year that battle happened, or I will be cooking and suddenly know some obscure chemical reaction that causes egg yolks to change from liquid to solid. If you ask me a specific question, I will know that I know something, but it is like a word on the tip of your tongue. I can sense the information is there, but my mind has to slog through the jumbled piles. 3 days later, in the middle of something unrelated, my brain will decide to produce the answer. If I try to access it, access is denied, yet I can half listen to another conversation and, without thinking, sound like I have a doctorate in electrical engineering. Someone will ask how I know that. I honestly do not know. I read it, heard it, or saw a show about it, who knows? My wife says I know a whole lot about everything, just not when it would actually benefit me, laughing out loud except in quiz bowl and trivia. I will beat you in contests of useless or random knowledge. Story 95. Like many wives and mothers, I have the superpower of knowing where any lost or rarely used item belongs, no matter who owns it. Story 96. I'm a menopausal woman who can sleep through the night. Story 97. My breasts can always tell when it is going to rain. Story 98. No one can tell I have been crying within seconds of wiping the tears away. It is awesome. Laughing out loud. Story 99. I am blessed with such a low level of body odor that it only manifests if I do not shower for a week. I have not tested going 2 weeks without showering and hope I never will. Story 100. I create full songs in my head, visualizing patterns and synthesizer presets. I also work with artworks. Story 101. I can carry nearly an infinite number of plastic grocery bags up 3 flights of stairs to my apartment. Story 102. I have peripheral vision at the grocery store. I am also aware of the shape and size of objects. Story 103. I don't get blisters unless I burn myself, and I don't have dry skin. My hands and feet are baby smooth despite not using lotion or other skincare products. Story 104. I can recite the lore of my special interest ad nauseum on a moment's notice. Story 105. Finding yourself in the checkout line behind someone who has a coupon for everything and wants to split their order. Story 106. Exceptional visual memory and retrieval abilities. Story 107. Estimating the time it will take to get somewhere with traffic, or how much a project will cost before it starts, including delays and unexpected costs. Story 108. I have somehow made it 34 years without ever wooing a single woman. Story 109. An uncanny ability to find the most creative and unlikely ways of screwing up. Story 110. I do not forget faces. I have had situations where a person I saw once on a subway platform appears in a completely different part of the world. I recognize them and make the connection. It makes the world feel smaller when you encounter the same people multiple times. Apparently that means I am a super recognizer, which is an actual thing, so that is cool. Story 111. I always need to use the restroom, but only when none are available. At a new mom and pop restaurant, the restrooms are out of service. I stop at a gas station and find there are no public restrooms. I am at work and my bladder needs relief. The restrooms are temporarily closed for janitorial service. I am stuck in traffic and should not have eaten that sketchy burrito. Story 112. I have a sixth sense for Rocket League demos. I always react just in time to avoid them. Story 113. I can obtain high-level software engineering positions even though I do not actually know how to code well. Story 114. I can figure out almost anything. Sometimes it takes a while and causes a lot of headaches, but I eventually learn whatever I set out to learn. That might be because I am stubborn. Story 115. I never complain. I adapt or I get walked on. I don't know. You decide. Story 116. I'm a MacGyver in the kitchen. You have nothing for dinner? I'll grab the 3 things left in the pantry or fridge and make a feast, at least according to my late husband. Story 117. More taste buds than the average person. It is way less fun than it sounds. Story 118. I have a constant radio station playing in my head. Story 119. I am very good with directions. For example, I am one of the few people at my workplace who can step off the elevator and walk in the correct direction every time without having to look first. Story 120. When I look for something and cannot find it, as soon as I say it out loud or ask someone where it is, I find it. Story 121. I've been told I'm a really good judge of character. I can usually sense when someone sucks. Story 122. I can guess the year of any movie within 1 year. I don't need to have seen it, but I must have heard of it. Story 123. Every time I visit a haunted place, the ghosts suddenly become shy and do not want to appear. I like to joke that I have a supernatural neutralizing power. True story. My friend and I visited a famous haunted site in the south and slept next to each other. One night I was fully awake. She got up to use the bathroom, and when she returned to bed she said she saw the famous ghost standing in the doorway. I did not see or feel anything. Some people say others have a third eye and can see things I cannot. Honestly, it was a fun vacation for me, not an eerie ghost hunt. Story 124. You know that moment after a meal when you have leftovers to pack up? 90% of the time I find a perfectly sized container to put them in. Story 125. I can memorize the lyrics or tune of any song in any language in 2 to 3 listens at most. Story 126. I can see color in grayscale images. I can tell what color something would be by its shade of gray. It took until year 10 for me to learn that this is not something everyone can do. I was astounded because it seemed so obvious to me. Story 127. I can overthink every interaction and find at least 4 reasons why you do not like me. This superpower really blossomed in middle school. It is a blessing and a curse. Story 128. I can make saran wrap cling exactly where I want, and I can fold a fitted sheet perfectly. Story 129. Thinking and speaking quickly while remaining articulate. Story 130. I can darken someone's urine by urinating in it myself. I have Gilbert syndrome. My body produces and excretes a large amount of bile. I have yet to find a way to monetize this or use it to my advantage. Story 131. I can control my adrenaline response. It came in very handy when I was an athlete, and I was the best sprinter my coach ever saw. Story 132. I can learn something in 5 minutes or less. The side effect is that my patience usually doesn't last that long. Story 133. I can take tragic or stupid situations and make comedic analogies. Story 134. Sprouting the most brain-dead and cursed shower thoughts in any given situation, I would just sit there and say the most cursed things you had the misfortune to hear. Story 135. I have an uncanny ability to avoid upsetting people when I speak, unlike everyone else I know. Story 136. More often than not, if I give it a little thought, I can tell whether you are an asshole or a decent person within the first few seconds of meeting. I can judge your overall intentions toward me, whether you are trustworthy, and so on. It kind of sucks when I think I have found a friend, only to discover my suspicions were true. Story 137. In video games, the controller vibrates when something bad is about to happen. I hear a faint buzz that serves the same purpose. Story 138. Twerking. No gag reflex. Overreacting and freaking out. Story 139. I have a spidey sense, but it only tells me exactly when I need to flip the grilled cheese. Story 140. Sometimes I dream about events, and they happen in real life further down the line. Story 141. Tactokinesis. I can move things by the simple act of touching them. Oh, and genuine empathy. Story 142. I can guess the time on a microwave 99 out of 100 times and arrive before long lines form. I regularly connect with wealthy or influential people in unique ways. I usually make decent money from anything I do. I can become best friends with almost anyone's pet and sometimes receive very valuable items or find unique things, such as housing, chairs, shoes, and cars, paying about 1/10 of even their used value. Given time, I can find drug dealers in the city and keep my composure in situations that overwhelm others, which is odd because my anxiety makes grocery shopping uncomfortable. My body can tolerate amounts of many drugs that would stagger a typical user. Story 143. I can parallel park like a boss on either side of the street. Story 144. My superpower is multitasking. I can offend multiple people at once. Story 145. I can bend my elbows a bit the wrong way. It is handy for plugging things in behind furniture. Story 146. Arrange information in a clear, easy to follow way. The current layout is completely wrong. Story 147. Bones that do not break despite millions of other health issues, including hypermobility and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Story 148. If there is more than one line to join, it doesn't matter how short or how fast it is. As soon as I join, it becomes the slowest, longest line. Conversely, if there is only one line to join, I usually have excellent luck and get in just before 20 other people show up. Story 149. I can let go of enmity as long as it is not a betrayal. Story 150. I always know how to get somewhere if I've been there before. It's like I have an internal compass. Years of learning multiplayer first-person shooter maps have paid off. Story 151. Attracting the least attractive woman in a group. It is a running joke with my friends now. We are out and there is a group of women. The least attractive woman will approach me at the bar, on my way to a well-deserved smoke, or on my way to the restroom. I am too polite to send her away, especially since I am an excellent wingman and do not want to end any connection between the groups, even though I know I will not get anything out of it. Story 152. Making people cover up, even though they never see me. Story 153. Doing nothing until the deadline, then rushing at the speed of light, no matter what I have to do. Story 154. I have an insanely strong core with 30 kilograms of muscle, but a layer of fat covers it. Story 155. Being fully prepared for imaginary arguments I will never have. Story 156. I can blur my eyesight at will. Backstory. I have a lazy left eye. I can move my left eye inward without moving my right eye. Story 157. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder has kept me alive on many occasions. The irony is that it also makes my life miserable. It is like my spinach and my kryptonite wrapped up in one neuroclusterfuck. Story 158. I interact with people in social settings even though I would rather not. Story 159. I have a heightened sense of smell. I have no idea why. If I'm close to someone, I can recognize them by scent alone. Once a friend walked behind me, and I knew she was there because I could smell her. It wasn't that she smelled strong or unpleasant. It was simply that I noticed her scent. Story 160. I can cry whenever I want. Story 161. I can walk into a building or house and tell you if anyone died there and exactly where they were when they died. Story 162. People will open up to me and tell me all their secrets without me trying. Story 163. I can ejaculate about 8 times the amount of the average man. That's a strange, useless skill. Story 164. I never slip, trip, or fall. I can walk or run on ice at full speed without concern. Story 165. Not me, but my fiancé has incredible facial recognition skills. Story 166. I have a very good sense of smell, but it is to my detriment. Whenever I enter a public restroom, it smells of a foul, nauseating odor that evokes nightmares. Story 167. I can untie knots. Not as in escapism but in jewelry, strings, and large cables. Story 168. I can defecate 5 times a day if I want, or hold it for days if I prefer. Story 169. According to my colleagues, I calculate and prepare dilutions in my head. It is not complicated. It is just basic mental math. Story 170. I'm terrible at book learning, but if I physically do something, I'll learn it very quickly. School was terrible, but in almost every job I've done, I outperform long-standing staff within a couple of weeks. I still feel like a fraud, as if I just accidentally get everything right and am always waiting for the other shoe to drop, when everyone realizes I'm an idiot and I have no idea what I'm doing. But it's been about 15 years now, and the pattern holds. Story 171. I have a high tolerance for boredom compared with others, even without my phone or access to cannabis. I just roam around in my head and can do it for hours. I wish I could find a job that is simply boring. Most of the jobs I have had were full of hostility, unnecessary problems, and soul-crushing insults. Story 172. The person in front of me in any line will need a price check, buy lottery tickets, or write a personal check. Story 173. I can stop my own hiccups. Asthma and a lot of exercise have taught me strong breath control, and I can relax the specific muscles that cause the spasms. Story 174. I'm exceedingly good at pissing people off. Story 175. I am able to disregard anything work-related as soon as I leave work. If it creeps into my mind, I can compartmentalize it and ignore it. It is life-altering. Story 176. Honestly, reading body language. I am American and spent the years from age 17 to 37 living overseas. I tried to learn several languages, but I met people from so many different places that I could not learn their spoken languages quickly enough. At some point, I became able to read people's body language so well that it became its own form of communication. No matter who they were, I could quickly understand where they were from, what they were thinking, how to greet them, and how to communicate with simple, non-offensive hand signs. I never treated people like dummies. I would often act the fool myself to make a clear point. It was amazing how many doors this opened without relying on words. In some cases, I did learn languages or simple phrases that helped, but watching movements and facial expressions and responding in kind became my main communication tool. Story 177. I have near-perfect dice rolls. Need a high roll or a low roll? Boom. Story 178. I am pretty good at finding parking. I also know when an event is not worth attending because there will be no parking. Professional tips. Get to know local parking regulations, especially for loading zones. Restrictions often expire around 6 in the evening. If an event starts at 7 in the evening, I sometimes arrive at 6:05, find a loading zone space, and relax with a cup of coffee. Some places have 2-hour parking limits. You are generally safe if you arrive 2 hours and 15 minutes before the posted limit expires. The same applies to parking meters. Smaller cars are easier to park. In major urban areas near clubs, parking enforcement may continue late at night because the city issues citations. Do not park across driveways or next to fire hydrants. If you are not authorized to use accessible parking, do not use those spaces. Do not be inconsiderate. Story 179. I slow down any queue that I join. I find the worst item on the menu and order it. I have started asking my wife to order for me. Story 180. The short answer is the perspective I have acquired over the years. The long answer is that I have watched people overburden themselves with uninspired hopes and dreams while getting emotionally invested in seemingly meaningless moments. I realized that most, if not all, of people's issues are caused by trying to keep up with the Joneses. I thought this tendency would fade in my generation, but I was wrong. It has increased with social media one-upmanship. I promised myself I would not live that way. I am currently single at 34 years old and living with my elderly mother, and life has rarely been this good to me. I say this as someone who had a decent childhood, was fairly popular in school, and had many social circles over the years. Now I am basically a friendless hermit, and it has never been better. Story 181. If I left my room now, I could attract someone without even trying. Story 182. I can tell if someone is black just by looking at them. It's like gaydar. Story 183. This will impress you. I can cling wrap any plate, container, or bowl better than anyone else. Story 184. I am a magnet for conversation. When I ride public transit, people often strike up a conversation, and I'm too nice not to respond. Story 185. I am 6 feet 3 inches and weigh 290 pounds. I can sneak up on people without trying. People can be looking right at me as I walk up to them and still be surprised. I have received many comments such as "When did you get here and I did not see you?" But you literally did. Story 186. I am proficient at following processes incorrectly and thus finding bugs. Story 187. I am unbeatable at Mad Gab. I am the Rain Man of this game. My brain just does it. I cannot figure out how to monetize that skill, and I cannot run a Mad Gab hustle at the local pool hall. Story 188. I can distinguish pills of different sizes and identify my medication by shaking the bottle. I developed this ability because I am very sensitive to sound and experience depression, which is why I take medication. Story 189. The ability to learn a broad range of manual tasks and perform them to a high standard. Story 190. I can sense pollinating linden trees from up to 3 blocks away. Story 191. I can tell whether people are judgmental just by looking at them. Story 192. I am consistently mediocre at everything, never bad, never great. I could do anything I set out to do, but only at a mediocre level. Story 193. Half the time I cook, I manage to make the simplest foods inedible. Story 194. I can imagine something great being achieved in the next 10 years. Story 195. Invisibility. Until recently, I have gone through life largely unnoticed. Story 196. My superpower is that when I am driving on the highway and have clear space ahead, every 45 seconds someone will switch into my lane and drive 5 to 10 miles per hour below the speed limit. Story 197. If people treat me badly, I manage to stay calm. I found that most people who treat me badly or disrespectfully tend to be religious. Meaning, if they are right, I have to tolerate them for one day. They have to tolerate hell forever. Story 198. My bowels go into complete lockdown until I am on my own porcelain throne in a bathroom no one else uses. Once, I went 92 hours without a bowel movement while on a trip to India. Story 199. I can go without eating for a whole day and still lift heavy weights and run around as if it is nothing. Story 200. I can look into people's eyes and tell what kind of person they are, whether they have experienced trauma or heartbreak. I read a person through their eyes. Story 201. I am one of the lucky people who cannot get a headache. I have never had one and I am very happy about it. Story 202. My wife says I have a fast metabolism. I don't gain weight easily even though I eat 3 to 4 times more rice than she does and more food in general. My waistline has stayed the same since she met me. I've had about the same overall size since my mid-20s. I am in my early 40s now. I thought that was normal until I saw my brother's change in size. She also says I burn fat just by breathing. I'll take that as a compliment. Story 203. I make a mean butter chicken, not the toned-down version for white people. It is as spicy as a regular chicken curry. Story 204. I remember the license plate of every car I have had. It goes back to 1982. Story 205. If you unintentionally lose an object, I will always find it, but I cannot find things for myself. The latest stories are about my mother losing her pendant in the forest and me emerging from the bushes with it, and my father losing a small stone in a very messy area. He had been looking for it for about 2 hours and I found it in 5 minutes. Then my mother lost her pendant again despite changing the ties, and I found it in the forest again. Have you lost something? You have not. Talk, spoiler. This does not work for absent fathers, innocence, or childhood trauma. Story 206. When someone says something, my brain within milliseconds automatically compares that information to everything else I know, so I can detect lies immediately. It helps me notice patterns and connect dots. I think this ability is why I'm good at making quick jokes and coming up with sarcastic remarks on the spot. Story 207. I can smell the place I am looking at and track scents. It is very cool when my girl hides open snack packages. Story 208. The power to disable computers with a touch. No matter what it is, it will stop working the second I lay a hand on it. Story 209. Lock, Chief, Fuzzy, Sparkle. sloppy, icky, nail, marvelous, mysterious. 9. Story 210. Triangulation computations in my head. Need to know direction of target, speed of target, and own speed. Story 211. I am good at remembering where random things and places I have seen are. For example, a paperclip in the attic, in a box, under other things, or in a red plastic bag. It is random and involuntary. I just remember. At the same time, if I have to remember where I put my phone, I can search for it while it is in my hand. Story 212. I can crunch an ungodly amount of work in a very short time without realizing the Herculean effort I put in. I just start and finish, and it only occurs to me what I have done weeks later. I cannot decide when this will happen. I show up for work, complete a month's worth of work in a day without planning it, and then spend the intervening periods forcing myself into a routine that keeps me meeting deadlines and getting my job done. A recent example was producing a piece of work in a single day that took my counterparts in other departments 3 months. I did it to a standard that is now distributed as an example of best practice. I thought this was a superpower or like wearing a cracked Guyver unit. It turns out it is hyperfocus, and I probably have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Story 213. I cannot gain weight, no matter how much I eat. I am a 34-year-old man, by the way. Story 214. I can stop the hiccups. It is really all mental. Envision not having the hiccups. Then snap your fingers. Done. Story 215. I don't get lost. I think I am better than average at imagining physical spaces, so I can build a map in my head with very few clues. I also check those clues habitually as a preventive measure. As I move around, I note street signs, address numbers, major landmarks, geography, and the sun's position. What I am bad at is convincing the people around me that I am right. Many times I have relented and let someone else lead, and they become more lost. When they give up, I step in and help. Story 216. I am spinning my fingers in opposite directions at the same time. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.